I have a big list of movies that are my comfort movies, and one that's right up the top is this little 2007 film called Enchanted. I just can recall so much of the music from that film and just how that film works, and it is one that has stayed with me so consistently throughout my entire time watching films, which is weird. It's not like it's the best thing ever. It's a great film, but it's not the best thing I've ever seen, yet it stays with me because of how much it sort of meant to me at the time. So now here we are, 15 years later. I'm not the wee kid that was watching Enchanted anymore, and I really want to see a sequel that lives up to those feelings, that connection that I have to the first film. Does it do it? Well, let me run it by you. This week we are talking about Disenchanted. Now, Disenchanted is a sequel to 2007's Enchanted. In this one we see our main heroes, Giselle and Robert. They're moving with their daughter Morgan to the suburbs, a little town called Monroeville. Even though she's been a mum to Morgan for all this time, Giselle's still finding what it means to be a mum on Earth instead of Andalasia, and she's really finding in a new place. She's not fitting in as strongly as she thought she could have, and it's turning into a bit of a mess. And when a gift from their friends from Andalasia, Nancy and Edward, gives her a chance for a magical wish, well, she gets that fairy tale life that she was after, but it does come with a few sinister strings attached. Now, did I like this movie? It was okay. It doesn't have that consistent story that the first one had. In fact, the way it starts shows off immediately that the way Andalasia's animated doesn't look as good as the first one. They've abandoned that like 2D style of animation for whatever this one is. And it doesn't even like pay tribute or homage to like the more CG 3D animated movies that Disney's doing these days. And it all starts with the character Pip reading a storybook to his chipmunk children. It feels very expository. It's quite a clunky way to open. It's not quite like everything's jumbled back into place. The movie doesn't connect to the tone of the first one. So you're left with a film that is trying desperately to find itself, to find that missing piece, and never quite does the whole way through. Anytime where we get those little moments where Giselle connects with Morgan, you get to see Robert and Giselle in love, you get to see Edward really gallivanting around and making a fool of himself, the comedy that comes from Pip turning into an evil cat, things like that, that's the charm of the first movie, but they're not the guiding force of this film. In fact, this film just spends a lot of time playing into the novelty of itself. It doesn't hit a balance, and that's what the first film did well. It very starkly knew what's the real world like, what's Andalasia like. The characters that come from this place have to be this, and the characters that come from the other place have to be that. It knew exactly how to play by its rules that it was setting. This film doesn't do that. It does have really beautiful music. If anything, while I don't think this film's going to have music that's as memorable as the first one, there's actually an almost sort of narrative to the way the music plays out, which is beautiful. And it's not something that the first film did. And they actually let Idina Menzel sing this time, like finally? Which was so good and refreshing. Anytime the movie works, it's often coming from the cast. And when I say that, what I mean is, it's often coming from Amy Adams. Amy Adams back as Giselle is brilliant. She picks it up, she runs with it straight away. They give her a little bit more to work with because she gets to play a bad, sinister take on the role. So seeing her go into this real light, airy, not at all grounded figure of Giselle, and then also get to do a villainous stepmother portrayal and see her really go wild with that as well. It shows the scope of Amy Adams' range, and it shows how she can really just take a script, take a character, and run with it, and she just has that ability. Giselle being the protagonist of this one is where things get a little screwy with the script, because she feels like she doesn't fit in. She needs to go through development and change to get us a satisfying ending for this film. But she's also the antagonist, or one of the antagonists, and it's a really muddly, confusing moment of script writing. It doesn't work. as strongly. Even if you get great performance moments from it, you get great songs that come out of it, it's a weak choice for the film. And unfortunately, because they doubled down on it, it's the centerpiece of the film. But there's other great performances in this as well. Gabriella Baldacchino plays Morgan in this film. She does kind of portray that kind of generic, snarky teen at first, and then the also quite stereotypical young protagonist of a fairy tale story who is looking to find her happily ever after. But when you get to see her finally, as the second act shifting into the third act, embrace the best of both and really get to see her actually engage with the mother-daughter connection that she has with Amy Adams, you get really, really quite a beautiful ending in the third act that redeems a lot of the film. So, and she brings that comes from her. Her and Amy Adams together actually generate something that I really fell in love with. As I said before, they give Idina Menzel more to do in this film. She gets to be a little bit of a mentor or a guide. Loved that. We don't get enough of James Marsden as Edward, but every scene that he's in is brilliant. He's still so funny. He is something that is truly carved out of a fairy tale, and he does it so well. Griffin Newman, who voices Pip this time round, has a bit of a clunky start. He has to deal a lot of exposition, but when he gets to run with the comedy that Pip generates, you get one of the best comedic performances in the film. There's also some weak points within the cast. Patrick Dempsey coming back as Robert. I love the chemistry he has with Amy Adams, but they made him be this fairy tale figment version of Robert in this, and that does not work for Dempsey. Dempsey plays grounded really well. He plays the suave, charismatic, everyday sort of man. He's like something that's carved out of a Mills and Boons novel, you know? Seeing him run around with a sword in this movie, so much of the movie was a little bit painful. And unfortunately, I also thought Maya Rudolph, coming off the back of, you know, Susan Sarandon playing an evil queen, but Maya Rudolph playing this evil queen that just didn't have the same level of presence. She didn't feel as sinister. She didn't command the screen as much. She definitely didn't hold her own in scenes against Amy Adams as strongly as someone like Susan Sarandon did. So it was a rivalry that just felt very one-sided. And they also didn't play on Maya Rudolph being such a great comedic performer enough. So I just was kind of lost as to why she was there or why she was cast in that way. The film uses a lot of visual effects, but it doesn't look or seem like the sort of film that has the budget to warrant using the level of effects it does. I really wanted Disenchanted to feel like Enchanted, because Enchanted knew how to make little tributes and teasers to both Disney works and fairy tales in general, had really clever messaging throughout. The humor was great, the music was wonderful, the costuming was brilliant, the acting was good, the messages were nice. You got to see a real brilliant and clever subversion of what we would expect from a Disney princess film. This film just feels like it wants to dress itself like Enchanted, but it loses a lot of the creativity that went into the first film. The score that I'm going to give today is probably higher than this movie deserves, and it is purely because seeing a performance from Amy Adams that was as good as it was, and seeing those little key emotional moments, those moments of connection, those moments where we got to step back to that film from 15 years ago, was so nice and it was so inviting. But it was just a shame it was packaged into something that just felt very plastic and inauthentic. So with all that said, I'm going to say that Disenchanted was very much by the by. Probably give it quite a weak 6 out of 10. It doesn't live up to its predecessor. We waited too long to get here. Disenchanted needed to be made probably 10 years ago. So have you seen Disenchanted yet, and what did you think of it? And what's your favourite comfort movie? When you're sitting there thinking, what am I going to put on? What am I going to watch? And you always know that you're going to love it, what's your go-to? I'd love to hear it. Until the next review. See ya.